On one October afternoon in 1814, a quiet London neighbourhood was torn apart by a wall of beer. Barrels burst. A tsunami of porter ripped through brick and bone, leaving destruction, death, and disbelief. This is the story of the London beer flood, and how one of history's strangest disasters killed 8 people. On October 17th, 1814, in the heart of London, an industrial accident unleashed a tidal wave of over 320,000 gallons of beer. It crashed through the streets of St. Giles, smashing buildings, flooding homes, and killing 8 people, most of them women and children. It sounds absurd, even comical, but for those who lived and died through it, the London beer flood was no joke. This is the true story of one of the strangest and deadliest industrial accidents in British history. In the early 19th century, London was the largest city in the world, dirty, overcrowded, and loud. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, and with it came massive brewing operations. One of the largest was the Meux and Company Brewery on Tottenham Court Road. It was a major producer of porter, a dark beer popular with London's working class. Porter was brewed in enormous vats, some holding as much as 18,000 barrels at once. The centerpiece of the Meux brewery was a massive wooden fermentation tank held together by heavy iron hoops. It stood 22 feet tall and was filled almost to the top. This wasn't cutting-edge tech. The design hadn't changed much in decades, but it worked until it didn't. At around 4:30 in the afternoon, on October 17th, one of the iron hoops snapped. It wasn't the first time. These bands often broke under pressure, and workers usually shrugged it off. The vats were strong enough to hold even with a broken hoop, or so they thought. This time they were wrong. About an hour later, without warning, the entire tank ruptured. Over 135,000 gallons of beer exploded out of the vat, triggering a chain reaction. Another nearby vat collapsed, releasing nearly 200,000 more gallons. Altogether, more than 1.4 million liters of beer burst out of the brewery. The force was so strong, it broke through a 25-foot-high brick wall, unleashing a tidal wave of porter into the streets. The flood slammed into the St. Giles Rookery, one of the poorest, most densely populated slums in London. The streets were narrow, the buildings were old and unstable. Most residents lived in cellars or tiny basement flats. They never had a chance. The beer tore through New Street, George Street, and Great Russell Street. Houses collapsed. Bricks and timber flew. A mother and daughter were crushed as their home caved in. At a nearby wake, mourners were trapped and drowned. 2 young children were killed in the basement of a pub. In total, 8 people died and many more were injured. Survivors described being knocked off their feet by the force of the flood, struggling to breathe in the chaos. The air reeked of alcohol for days. The smell lingered. So did the shock. The Meux brewery faced a public scandal, but not much more. A coroner's jury quickly ruled the disaster an act of God. No one was charged. The brewery was even refunded the excise duty on the lost beer, a sum of over £7,000, equivalent to nearly £1 million today. The victims' families, on the other hand, received nothing. No compensation, no support. The Meux Company rebuilt the vat and kept brewing. Business went on. For the poor of St. Giles, though, the flood was just one more tragedy in a life already full of them. Over time, the London beer flood became the stuff of urban legend. Some stories claimed hundreds died. Others said people ran into the streets with pots and pans to scoop up beer, or even that the dead were found with smiles on their faces.